If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you.
Hello Internet, I'm glad to tell you we've got General Bornman with us again. You have to get used to him because you're going to see him quite a few times. And today we are talking about the military academy. Now South Africa has a good military academy. It's not well known, it's not as well known as West Point, one of the famous ones, but it produces very good officers. Sir, welcome back here. We're very grateful for you. Once again, I will say you're a man who can speak Afrikaans fluently, speak German, some Zulu also probably, I believe. But we did this in English for everybody so you can understand.
The military academy started in Pretoria at the University of Pretoria, where the students started there with their various courses. And they were no other than General Malang, General Viljoen, and a few of the counterparts. They started there. Later, the students moved to Stellenbosch University. They were accommodated in the normal student residence, and the only difference was these students went to classes in their uniform, and they stayed in one hostel or at various hostels. And then later they moved, in the very early 60s, they moved to Saldanha Bay. Now, Saldanha Bay was chosen, I think, as a political move because that was the consistency of a certain Mr. Frans Erasmus. And he wanted to do something for his constituency, for the good, because Saldanha is an excluded place. Now, it is situated about 120 kilometers west of Cape Town, along the west coast. It's a fishing town, a lot of fishery activities, factories and so on going on, and farmers normal farmers with sheep in the surrounding area. And I think it was the ideal place for a student to be. I started at the military academy in 1967 after my year in the Army Gymnasium. Now, there I met people from the Air Force, pilots, and normal supporting staff, logistical staff, and technical staff, as well as our naval people, trained as executive officers, and as well as the supporting staff in logistics of the Navy. Now, you could study at the military academy the BA direction. That is mainly history, geography, and a few other subjects that I will mention. Then on the BSc side, you could study chemistry, physics, and of course mathematics. And then on the commercial side, the BCom direction, you could study economics, accountancy, mercantile law, and various subjects related to the degree BCom. The degree was vetted by Stellenbosch University, and you also got your degree certificate from Stellenbosch University. But we were not really Matis, nothing against the Matis, please. But we had our own character and our own esprit de corps at the military academy. As a first year, we got there as candidate officers in the Army and the Air Force, and the Navy, they were called midshipmen. Now, before I carry on with our military academy, the comparison between West Point was that they normally study for a year, and then they go into various branches, and the same with Sandhurst in Britain. It's an officer's course for a year. Remember, we did the officer's course now at the Army Gymnasium. So here we met at the military academy, our naval and Air Force counterparts. It was quite an experience. They were the same age. The pilots were just freshly qualified as pilots, and their friends were flying around all over the world, and they had to study. But we started off in the first year attending classes and all that. I'm not going to bore you with all the academical subjects that we took, but I think in closing, I can say in hindsight which subjects I do think has got to get involved in the syllabus in that area. We were secluded there, only males in that military academy at that stage. Later on, women were also allowed, and I had the privilege of my middle daughter, Antoinette, to take her to the military academy when she enrolled for her first year. And 3 rooms away from where I slept, my daughter was booked in. But the passage that we were accommodated was now for women quarters only. That was quite an experience to drop your daughter off there and for her to study and just tell her, I remember I was in this room, and keep up the name. She also finished at the military academy in the BCom direction. Sports also played a very important role, and there was a competition, all sports like volleyball, cricket, hockey, and so forth, and cross country. Each year group represented a team to compete against the staff, first, second, and third year students. It was quite good, and luckily we didn't play rugby against each other because people could settle some scores there if they wanted to. We also played rugby. We had a very good rugby team. Unfortunately, the hockey team always had to go to Cape Town for the league. The Boland, in which province we played, didn't have a hockey league. So these guys had to travel to Cape Town every weekend, and we played in the Boland League. And we played against a few old Springboks, and it was an honor to meet people like Chris Koch and these people, not playing regularly, but now and then in the fourth team, they played just to keep up their good name. But like people like David de Villiers, then a Springbok captain, and the Boland team, we played against them, and it was quite an experience. I really enjoyed my rugby. We were also introduced to various other sports like skin diving, which I enjoyed and practiced every weekend, and then yachting. You know, this is important for a young man to know what is yachting and how to go about in a yacht and these things. I mean, we were born landlocked, and now we are at the sea. And did I enjoy that sea? The water was very cold, but you know, if you're young, your blood temperature is always high, so there wasn't a problem. And I must tell you that the crayfish in that area is the best that you could have, and it was quite an experience to go there. Our lecturers were seasoned people in their academical field, and they really formed a nucleus. We were also introduced to various visiting lecturers, like people from the newspaper world, and about any topic. And the one apex every year was our dean at that stage, Brigadier de Force. He was a professor in physics, gave a demonstration of liquid nitrogen, and then he used to take roses and little tennis balls and squash balls and put it into that liquid nitrogen and then breaking it against the wall and explaining all these things. It was really interesting. He enjoyed it as well, because now all the other guys that's not in the physics class can go along. And I must tell you, I was accompanied with a few bright guys in mathematics and in physics. They studied the BSc direction. And I remember some of them, when they look at a mathematical problem, they could finish it without going through the steps. And then the lecturer used to ask them, how did you get to this answer? The answer is correct, but you've got to go through certain steps. They just said, well, it's just the way it works. This is the way I see it. I've got the answer. Isn't that the main thing? And writing exams with these guys, especially in geography, after an hour and a half, they stand up and they go. You're still slogging there for another hour and a half to try and get the best points, and then they get into the 90s and nearly hundreds. It was actually a privilege work with these guys. And they all, after the army, went to CSIR, and they all got doctorates later years outside the Defence Force. But it was good to work with these brainchilds. But we mastered in rugby, skin diving, and yachting, and these things. We got an honours degree after 3 years in those subjects. But we passed and we got our degrees, and that is the main thing. And some of the guys did very well. In the period that we were there, a new dispensation started with various phases. I'm not going to bore people with that. And our commanding officer was General Magnus Malang, and the dean was then Brigadier de Vos. Well, we even got old Dr. Danny Craven coming out to help us with rugby coaching and these things, and it was good. And it was good to study there. We got paid, and to compare us with the poor students at Stellenbosch University, we all had cars, and we could go anywhere that we would like to go. Before getting, of course, into the academical field, I'd like to tell a story. Now, this is a story about 2 Air Force pilots, and I'm not going to jeopardize this story with the real facts. It's going to be a little bit of spicy, but it's a program that anybody can watch, so I'm not going to be naughty. In bringing this to the point, we started in early February with our academical year, the first semester, up till the end of June for the July recess. When other students went on holiday, we went on military courses. The pilots went to fly, the naval guys went to sea, and us army guys did some military courses like demolitions and our weapons training, support weapons training, and this type of thing. The logistical guys went into logistical courses and all that. That qualified you later up to captain's rank. You just had to do the years and get the rest of the courses there. Now, these 2 guys, eager pilots, one the afternoon, just after the classes, they got into a Beetle and they drove to Petersburg. And typical Air Force, and they know they're going into the winter, they dressed in their flying overalls, but because it's going to be cold. And after a while, the one guy's driving and the other one is checking the oil pressure and the fuel consumption and everything, like they do in an aircraft, pilot and co-pilot. And then they change around. And as they hit the Karoo, it's getting colder. They put on gloves, and later they, when it's now really cold, now in the midst of the Karoo, which is a very arid area, but very cold at night, they started putting on their flying helmets to cover the ears. And the last thing was the flying helmet has got a little thing that you put over your nose when you demand oxygen, and it's got a little tube running in front of this, and they've got this little thing, and they speak to each other, and so they reach the metropolis town of Richmond to refuel. And with all this, there was a lot of mist in the car, and you couldn't see, and they stopped at the petrol pump to refuel, and out of his little den comes the petrol attendant on night shift, and he walks to this car, and the guy opens the window, and that guy got a fright of his life. He thought it was people from Mars with this little clapper and the helmets and everything misty, and he took for the road. He ran away. They had to wait for 6 o'clock that morning for the shift change to come and to refuel all these things. But this is just how we enjoyed life there. For a young man, it was excellent. Of course, in hindsight, now they say hindsight is clear sight, and I'm not going to talk about the BSc or the BCom, because those directions were purely based on, if I can say, the civilian degrees that you get at a normal university. And the guys did well, and we had very good lecturers there. But I did a BA, And I really think during our third year, we did a lot of geography about Angola, but we did nothing about Mozambique. We did nothing about Zimbabwe. Nothing about the situation in Zambia and Botswana. A little bit in Botswana, but we didn't study any geography of those countries. Then I really feel we could have studied the situation of infrastructure in Africa and Southern Africa, particularly, and especially waterways. You know, airstrips and roads and these things you can get from a map. But the navigational possibilities of waterways, and later we found out that the insurgents made great use of ferries and waterways, especially in the Caprivi Strip to cross from Zambia over the Namibian Caprivi Strip right into Botswana to South Africa. So I think that is really a thing that we could have studied. I don't know whether they have it nowadays. I'm not clued up, and I'm making the suggestion that it would have been nice in hindsight, please, and I'm not criticizing. I think our studies was good. Then anthropology. That is to me very, very important. Our own anthropology in Southern Africa to understand the people. And I found it that I went into an area in Messina with the Venda people surrounding me. And I did a lot of reading and I spoke to the Venda people. But, you know, it's so important if you understand their culture and their customs and to respect them. And I'm not talking about the language because that's a very difficult language to speak Venda. But even just to greet the guy, you know, just hands-on studies about the people. And, you know, if you talk to a Venda about the Imperial Kingdom and this type of thing, he's got a lot of respect for you because it shows him that you respect him as a person and you respect his heritage. And tomorrow in South Africa is Heritage Day. Then languages was an important thing. We had a situation with the end of the reign of Maputo in the Congo. And I'll tell you the story why languages is important. And we were there as South Africans looking after our embassy, but the Belgians were there, the French were there, and the SAS, the Brits were there. And luckily for us, after 94, we knew all these guys. It was a matter like an old reunion when we saw them there. The Brits had very nice hovercrafts. They carried the people, if there's a problem, from the Congo into the northern part. I don't know what that Congo is now named, but I'll get you in the name. Brazzaville Congo, sorry. Across the river. And the Belgians knew where all these situations was. It used to be a Belgian colony. They collected the people. And our troops from South Africa, we had to man the crossing points. And our people had to watch that all these bridgeheads that we established, that it is safe, that the rebels can't come and surprise us there. I had a colonel there, Frans Fourie, and President Mandela was in a naval ship going there to speak to Mobutu in Brazzaville, Congo, a neutral area. And as the ship wanted to enter the harbor, harbor captain in Brazzaville just said, no entry. The ship must be able to speak French because I must give instructions in French. And you don't have, on that ship wasn't a French interpreter or anybody that could speak French. And what we did is one of our aircraft was also there because the ship was used as the base of the talks, but it had to dock into the harbor. We took the aircraft that President Mandela came in, and one of our troops could speak French from Special Forces. We landed him into that aircraft. He went up and he spoke to the harbor master, very happy that we could parlez-vous français? and they could bring in the ship for the talks. Another thing, and I'm going to mention the country, the American envoy that was there, came to us. We had a sat-nav radio, and he begged our Colonel Franz Fourie, please, sir, may I use your phone? I must phone the President of America. This is just to prove to you that languages is important. And French, especially in Africa, in Central Africa, if you talk about Rwanda, Burundi, the Congo, to speak French is absolutely vital. Another language is Swahili. Now, please, uh, French is, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's a known European language, and you can give the guy as a additional subject and put him on a course and groom him to be a French speaker. I'm not talking about interpret level, because I mean there you've got to be very, very good in all the languages that you can interpret. And the same applies to Swahili, which is in the central part from Uganda and Kenya. They speak Swahili, and that's very important. I want to tell you another story. With the same situation in the Congo, we were asked by the United Nations to release the troops from Tanzania immediately out of the area. They were there as peacekeeping troops. And we had a major, Bruce McIver, who could speak Swahili. He grew up in Central Africa. And I'm telling you, those soldiers from Tanzania, they were very happy that this major from South Africa could speak Swahili, to get them into the aircraft and to speak to them and this type of thing. So that was a very big plus point. So languages is absolutely vital. Then in the political science field, we must really speak about the influence of Russia and China. And you know, China is in the news now, not being the very strong economic power and the problems they have. Just to introduce to the student and to awaken the necessity for him to study further. I mean, just to get a degree and not do further studies and updating, you're gonna get nowhere. I'm not predicting that we should learn Chinese, because a lot of people say that Mandarin is also difficult, but they can all speak English. And then Spanish. A few of my friends went on a Spanish staff course, and they could speak Spanish fluently after a year struggling with the books in Spain. And that is absolutely important with the Cubans and the situation with the Cubans that we had. So this is a few things, and then introduced to them the books of Mao Zedong and Little Heart. Well, that was done. And in history, we majored in the First and Second World War, all the battles and the reasons for the war, and as well as the South African wars, the First and Second World War, and we touched on Vietnam. At that stage, Vietnam was bleeding, and that was a good field of study. The last one I want to discuss is legal aspects. We just studied our one subject was military law. It was just how the law in the military works. How do you do boards of inquiry, certificates of inquiries, court martials, and summary trials, and the whole concept of the military law, which is a sub-law in our South African law. But they didn't introduce international law, and that is very important. I had one situation in Musina. It was a very dry season, and the international law says in a dry season, in a dry riverbed, if it's a international border, the Taalweg, the middle of that water point, is then the border, because animals and people can make use of that. Otherwise, they violate border crossings. And what happened, it was people of 3-2 Battalion that was under my command in Messina. They went to a water hole, and that day the temperature was 64 in the Limpopo Valley. No, not 46, not 64, otherwise they would have outlived this thing. And the farmer from the other side, a white farmer, came and he started mocking these guys, and a little scuffle sort of came out of this because he grabbed their radios and things, and they grabbed it back, and they gave him a good dressing. I'm not going to mention his name. And then, of course, a big international scandal. And luckily, I knew the story of the Tallweg, and my troops were told that they can use the water there in that area. And that was how I saved my own bacon in that day, with quoting the international of the Tallweg and Wallace. So I think we could have really, and then immigration and refugees, because in Angola we had to do quite a lot of that. Whenever there was a big war on the Angolan side, the people crossed the border. And what do you do with these guys? Do you arrest them? What do you do with them? What's their rights? Because they are refugees. They ran away because there's a war. And the same happened in Messina. How do you treat these guys? What's their rights? What's your rights with this situation? One had to learn this as we went on, and I call it on-the-job training. Because this is about the situation on the military academy in a nutshell. It was a wonderful 3 years, and I was very grateful to study there.
General, thank you for that. I've been quiet for almost half an hour. I'm sure that some people will be very impressed. But I must tell you, it was fascinating. Thank you for that. I have a lot of questions, though. The first one I would want to ask you is, were you wearing some kind of a special uniform, like a cadet uniform, or would you wear your branch uniform wherever you came from?
No, we wore the normal army uniform with white epaulets, just a white tag to indicate that you're a candidate officer in the first and second year. In the third year, we were commissioned with 1 star. Well, it's not an American star, because then you're a 1-star general as a second lieutenant. And the naval cadets became ensigns, the most junior officer rank in the Navy, after a midshipman, which is also a candidate officer. To distinguish our various corps, we wore the beret and the insignia of that corps. In other words, infantry, you wear the springbuck head. The armored guys wore a black beret with their insignia, the proteas, and the artillery people wore their beret with an exploding grenade as the insignia. And so we went on. The engineers had their badges, and the service corps wear their various badges with their blue berets. So you could distinguish at that stage already in which branch or corps this guy is going to. The naval cadets were all uniformly. You couldn't see in which branch they were, and the same with the Air Force. The only distinction that you could make there was whether the guy was a navigator or a pilot, looking at his wings, and only when he wore his tunic. That was the situation. Other badges of insignia that we wore was parachute wings, and that's it. Further, we wore the normal uniforms, but you could see from where this guy is going, where he is actually going, not from where he, because he just started, where he's going to.
So which beret were you wearing?
A green beret, infantry.
Bokop.
Bokop. Yes.
I'm not going to ask you that old thing about the woman and the skirt and a bokop, because there might be children listening here, but the infantrymen I've had here before all agreed with that very, very well. Sure. The professors, would they be military officers? Would they be wearing uniform?
Yes, they wore uniform. They were all the lowest, yeah, well, we even had lieutenants that graduated giving subjects to the naval guys and to the Air Force guys. Then mostly of them captains, majors, lieutenant colonels, and full colonels were the staff, the lecturing staff uh, at the military academy. I said the average guys were about lieutenant colonels, commandants at that stage, but they were all military guys, and some of them did a lot of military courses as well. So they were qualified in the military, or in the army, or the Air Force, or the Navy. So we,
how would you address such a professor? Is he known on his military rank or as professor or both?
military rank. Later years, uh, they had civilians, and now they also have civilians there, like Professor Abel Estreisen, a very well-known person in South Africa on military matters. He's a professor, and they address him as professor. The stage that we were there, we only had one professor, and that was the dean of the faculty, Brigadier de Vos. But we addressed him as Brigadier, and later there was a naval captain, Captain Nel. He also became a professor when Brigadier de Vos left, but we addressed him on the naval rank, captain.
And all military courtesy would be followed. You would salute an officer like that.
Yes, salute and stand to attention and stand up when they get into the class. The discipline was very good. You respected the guy. There was never a problem amongst these guys. And each branch had a military training officer, because on Thursdays, and I forgot to tell you that, on Thursdays we did military training. The Air Force guys went to Langebaan to do training there, especially navigational training. The naval guys went to SAS Saldanha, which is a naval base just next to the military academy, and we did military training in that area, various, and we even did courses, qualifying courses like chemical, biological, and warfare in those fields. So it was very interesting, and that helped you in your further military career.
Yeah, this is fascinating. I'm wondering who pays for this?
For what? The military budget.
Okay, so you arrive as an officer, you get your normal salary. You don't pay for your course.
You don't pay for your course. If you leave early before your contract is expired, you've got to pay back that money. We had to pay our own books. I'm talking about textbooks and handbooks and books. We had a very extensive library, very good library. And we got newspapers from even from the Old Transvaal and Free State every day, fresh in the library. And you had to fund out of your salary. You had to fund your own books. But for the class fees and the professors and the lecturers' pay, that came from the defense budget, and they also paid you from the defense budget. I'm not going to tell you what we got out every month. It was about 120 rand at the utmost. But you could still make a living. And at that time, if you compare it to a student at Stellenbosch, whose father could pay for everything, even his boarding and lodging, because we didn't pay boarding and lodging, that was from the military rations, and still get 100 rand a month payment. We were rich guys in those days. We were really rich and fortunate.
We hear all these stories, especially West Point once again, about hazing, where the first year arrivals are being abused by the ones who's there on their third year or fourth year of the senior cadets. I know that this fellow, George and James, wrote a book on war crimes, Voices War Crimes USA, and one of the things he looked at, and the reason why I actually wrote that book, is simply because it came out that 1 out of every 3 females serving in the US military, this is their own statistics, at the academy, will be sexually abused in some way or another. Now, I need to ask you, is there any such things at the military academy in Saldanha?
Well, I can gratefully say no. In our time, there were only males, and definitely not a problem. We were initiated as a first year up till a certain point where we had to do certain things, run around and go into the fields and do a lot of PT and things, but nothing inhumane. And then it was all over. Then you were introduced into the military academy and you were part of the situations. You called the first, the second years on their names, and of course the third years were officers. You addressed them on their rank, lieutenant or ensign or whatever the case might be. I'm not one for initiation because this is the place to build grudges against people, and you get people who misuse that little part of initiation. You know, he can bully the first comers, but it's got its advantages. But really, there were no malpractices that the guys had to do things that was inhumane or from a sexual point of view or so on. We never had that. I know of nothing of that kind. And I have nothing. As I said, my daughter was there. She should have told me if there was any problem like that during her 3 years at the military academy. So categorically, there could have been problems. Please, because we're only humans. But I can vouch for the time that I was there, and even the initiation. Once it's gone, you know, your period is finished with the initiation. Everything went absolutely normal. What we there had is a system of a mentor. The third year was called the grandfather. The second year was called the father, and the first year was called the son. And so families were built right up to General Malong's time. And this was important. He was the monitor that you could, the mentor that you could go to if you have study problems, if you have problems with other students or staff members or things like that. He was a real mentor. And this built more character and friendship than anything else. This was a very good thing that they have. And I know that at West Point it's the same. And in Sandhurst not, because they only take in 1 year. But most definitely that was a very good thing. I still call, although my grandfather, I superseded him in rank, but that's not the point. I still call him grandfather when I see him in a very polite way, and I still respect the guy. But it was only good. I personally didn't like initiation. To me, it's sometimes humiliating.
Well, I suppose you can always take revenge on the rugby field, and now I want to go there because I know that Dr. Craven was actually an officer as well. He enlisted during the World War II. He became a captain or something.
Lieutenant Colonel.
Lieutenant Colonel, he ended up Lieutenant Colonel. Okay, for those people who don't remember Doc Craven, can you please tell us who's Donnie Craven?
Donnie Craven was a farm boy from Lindley in the Free State. And he went to Stellenbosch University and he obtained a doctorate in physical training. And he was the dean of the physical training faculty. But that's his academical part. And he had a dog called Bliksem. A notorious dog, and wherever the old doctor went, the Bliksem was there. And he was actually Mr. Rugby in South Africa. He was a Springbok rugby player, a scrum half. And in the early years, he played for the Springboks. And then he became the president of our rugby board. And really, I think he was one of the cornerstones of our South African rugby. He knew rugby. I attended, and of course, this is very important. I attended a few courses over weekends at Stellenbosch University with rugby clinics that they had. And that man knew everything about rugby. And it was great to listen to him. And then he always commanded a lot of other Springboks to be there to teach you rugby and the finer points of rugby and these things. And you know, your ideals as a little child, to look at Cham Ush and I mentioned old Chris Koch. It was very great to speak to these guys. But this was Dr. Dani Craven. And as I said, he was the dean of the physical training faculty. Yes, in Second World War, he joined up, and he was seconded to the Army College. He started as a captain, he ended as a lieutenant colonel, and he was in charge of the PT branch to get all these guys fit and to train the PT instructors, to go out to the various units and to train the troops to get fit. That was Dr. Dani Craven's claim to claim. In the old Army College at the PT gym, there are still some photos where Colonel Dani Craven is sitting with his merry men that did the PT courses.
Well, he was the one who did that flying pass. He would,
Pass,
yes.
as a scrum off, yes.
Yes.
He invented it. In other words, if the flankers run up to him, they can't tackle him because he's already on the ground and flying, passing the ball to the fly off.
Yes, he was a wonderful old chap. He was actually Mr. Rugby. I mean, he was the man everybody grew up and knew about Dr. Craven in those days.
His very good friend was the Frenchman, Albert Ferras, the head of France Rugby. And the two of them got the French to come and play in South Africa the first time in 1955. And although Dani couldn't speak French, they communicated through rugby. And they were very, very, very good friends. And this Mr. Ferras always stood up for South Africa and the Springboks due to the diplomacy of Dr. Craven. And in Stellenbosch University, he stayed in the hostel called Daybreak. And after he retired from the university, he still stayed there. And the university said to him, "But hey, Doc, you must go now. You're not part of the university." He said, "No, I'll stay here. This is my home. I'm going to stay right here." They had quite difficulties getting the old man out of the hostel. But he was actually a character.
May I ask you, what position did you play?
I started off as a flanker and eighth man. And as the years went on and the kilograms stayed, I went into the front rank. My last year in the military academy, I played front rank. And after that, for 14 seasons, I played front rank, yes. And at the age of 30, I stopped playing rugby. I never played provincial rugby. The closest that I got was in Kimberley. I made the 4th team of Griquas. That's the closest I got to international rugby because they couldn't rely on me because, you know, you're just busy and getting fit and into the team, and then you've got to go on a course or you've got to go to somewhere and so on. And I had to make the decision, my career or rugby. It was my career was the choice that I made. But I enjoyed rugby. And after that, of course, coaching and in the administrating of rugby teams, and it was great. It was great. Rugby is a wonderful sport.
Yes, indeed. My wife always say that the South Africans are the most violent people she's ever seen in her life. And I showed her a rugby game once, and she was tremendously impressed of how violent we really can get, even on the sporting field. I think it's good. It's a good thing. But now I need to ask you something, sir. When you had that international law problem with the lack of water, was that where you got the award for saving the rhinos?
It was in that same year, but it was saving the hippos.
Hippos, forgive me.
What
Yes, can you tell
what
us about that?
what we did, when I told the troops protecting the Zimbabwean border, it's senseless if we have the soil and we preserve the soil and we don't preserve nature. And we got some fodder from farmers further south. And with our normal logistic vehicles and runs to various units, because I had about 8 units along the Limpopo River on the Zimbabwean border, uh, we always took some fodder and the troops put it near the hippo pools because the Limpopo River was absolutely dry, just here and there a few pools of water. And obviously all the hippos concentrated in that water because a hippo can't stay out in that sun, he dies. And we put the fodder there for them to eat, and they all could survive through that winter. And it was the Hunters Association that gave me that. It was a big medal and a certificate promoting nature, and they used my words. We can keep the terrain, but we must preserve nature, otherwise it's worthless.
It's an interesting thing for me that everybody I speak to here on the program, the former soldiers, they all have a love for nature. They really do respect life, they respect nature. Most of them, I would say, are quite close to God. They seem to have this inbuilt decency about them. Would you say that comes from basic training or through the military academy, or is it just part of a man?
And I think it's a mixture of everything and a mixture of our cultures. I think that is the main thing. Uh, our school system. I mean, obviously uh, they teach you to be kind to nature, not to uh, destruct nature, cut off trees and bushfires and this type of thing, and rather plant a tree. And the saying was, all the apples that you've eaten, have you planted one apple tree? Somebody else did it, so plant a tree. Not necessarily an apple tree, but any tree. And I think it comes through the school system, and as I said, our culture and upbringing. And nature conservation is a South African thing. We do make mistakes. We definitely do make mistakes, but I think we conserve and preserve nature, and this includes especially the animal life. I don't hunt. I don't see the necessity of hunting. I see the necessity of culling to control animal uh, the amount of animals of overgrazing, especially in a place like the Kruger Park. The elephants get the numbers are really increasing, and then you've got to cull. But I don't hunt. I don't like that. But that's a South African thing because
So I believe in 1968, Magnus Malan, General Malan, was the head of the academy.
that's correct. Yes.
And that is the time when he figured out the role of cavalry in modern warfare, in the sense that you can use cavalry in counterinsurgency. And then he went one step further, which was really amazing. He figured out that they can be used in riots and things like that. In other words, urban terrorism. It can be used there as well. So it always really struck me as forward thinking. So my question to you, sir, is was that encouraged at the military academy? to think forward, to think out of a box, to get the job done.
Oh yes, and of course, if you refer to cavalry, it's soldiers on horseback.
Yes, horse.
Yes, he encouraged them, and this is an old British thing, which I think is very positive. An officer must be able to ride a horse. After the Army Gymnasium, our first course was a PT course, and a big part of that was the equestrian phase to teach us to ride horses. And from '68 onwards, he had the infrastructure built there, and all the students had to get on horseback and fight. Not fight, just to uh, master the art of horse riding. And in the military, I think the best example of cavalry, men, soldiers on horseback, was the Rhodesians with their Grey Scouts. They were very successful. And I'm being very, very frank. We had a unit in Potchefstroom that trained the horses. And we had a school at in Namibia at Otavi. There was also a school there, but they didn't achieve great successes. If you want to measure them against great successes, but they could patrol. We in the army never used horses in the urban sense, apart from just patrolling, but not on the active sense against riots. The police did, and they had certain successes. But I think it's very important for an officer to be able to be a good horseman. That is very, very important. But it's unfair to compare us against the Grey Scouts. But they were very, very, very successful. I'm being very, very openly and frank, and this is the way I felt. While I was at Messina, I had about 50 horses under my command. And we trained the black troops. They came from Leboa, which the closest to horseback they got was riding on donkeys in mischief. And we taught them how to ride horses, and they became excellent horsemen. And I also loved riding horses. And you know, over weekends I went to one of our bases, Madimbu, in the northeast of my area of territory, and my 3 daughters and I were riding in the riverbeds of the Limpopo, and we enjoyed everything, even confronted by buffalo, but I mean, we had our plans worked out. If you see a herd of buffalo, you turn around, and if you see elephant, and the trumpet of the elephant is not good for a horse, they get very nervous. You just turn around and just go the other way. It was for me, absolutely a milestone in my life that myself and my 3 daughters could ride there in the riverbeds and so on. But that was on the recreational part. That area being very close to the Kruger National Park, we deployed the troops in force. And you know what the Lions did? And of course, they were fastened on the halter at night time and fed. And the lion used to jump into this temporary base, and he knows one of the horses gonna pull loose. And the next morning, not very far from there, you see the dead horse and just the buttocks has been eaten out. So I had very awakened troops there. They didn't sleep at night because they could hear the lions. Although they made fires and they were ready to counter them, but really they were really awakened. And on the border now, you must remember at that time the incidents were very low when I was there, but they could cover vast areas of patrolling, and it was very good. Another thing that I also did was when I did a team building exercise with my staff. We got on horseback and we patrolled a certain area that the troops normally patrol. And you know, the horses, they sort of shuttled you that you can speak to everybody. Now you speak to this guy and then that guy and so on, and so we went on. In the evenings we had to base down and the guys had to groom their horses, feed them and everything, and then we went on. It was always great, and we did the patrols. I did it myself, and I tell you, the guys were wide awake in the evening because the lions were there. But that is the story. But in Wambaland, not very successful.
But do you become close to this horse? Is it like a dog?
Oh, even more. I remember my horse's name there was called Tonka. I always wondered what happened to old Tonka because he was getting older and he was a strong horse. And the troops. Oh, they love their horses and they know their horses. And these guys from Leboa, hey, they were excellent troops with the horses. Really, it was excellent seeing them and operating. And the locals were afraid. They had a status symbol, If on horseback they get there and they see this is a soldier, fully armed, and there wasn't a problem. No, we had very good internal successes with that.
So it seems like cavalry is not dead. But it
No,
can still
cavalry is
keep
never
on
dead.
making a comeback here all the time.
It's not dead.
Well, I will tell everyone here that the general has agreed, and I'm most grateful, sir, that he will talk to us about the Afrikaner. Because it was Colonel Saki Mare from a parachute battalion who made also on this program who said something in Afrikaans, where he said, always remember where you come from. And what he meant, and he said also, you're an Afrikaner, almost of the people listening here. And would you believe I got a few emails and a few letters, and thank you for everyone, to tell me what is an Afrikaner, because it seems there's a lot of people listening here who don't quite understand where we come from. And I've seen this in Europe. I say, man, I'm from Africa, and they look at me and they say, really? And I say, yes. And then I know they're wondering why I'm white. There's a lot of us out there, and the Afrikaner achieved a lot in life, really. So I think in the next episode, sir, if you can tell us about the Afrikaner, but for now, is there anything about the military academy you can tell us? I will say to you why everybody is worried about the new army, the new defense force. And my theory is that the officers coming out of the academy who's going to work through the rank to senior rank will be loyal to the Constitution. And that's, of course, what I hope will happen, because if it doesn't, you're going to have a big, big problem. So is the military academy still up to standard? Are they producing the type of military officers we want?
Of course, I don't have first-hand knowledge at the moment. Our year group, we had our 50th anniversary, graduating from the military academy a few years ago in 2019. They went to the military academy. Obviously, things have changed, but I can't say any negative things at present. I must really go back there and go and sit and speak to the guys. But if I listen to guys like Abel Estreisen, who's a professor there, there's a Professor Frey as well at Stellenbosch University, and these are guys who are world renowned for their knowledge in these various subjects. I am very positive. About 2 months ago, I looked at the staff photo of the military academy. It seemed to me sound. Here and there, you see something on YouTube of one of the lecturers doing talks on some of the battles in southern Africa. The specific one was in Sundwana, in Natal, with the Brits against the Zulus. I think it was an excellent lecture done by a lieutenant colonel. The military academy have changed. There's a lot of various directions that one could go. You can study a degree, a year diploma, or a 2-year diploma, and this type of thing. But I haven't got contact, being out of the Defence Force for 20 years, directly with somebody from the military academy. But really, I think it's wishful thinking what I'm going to use now. I wish we could go back to the military academy for a week and just intermingle with the present students and have a period or so. It could be in the evening, and discuss our experiences that we had and speak to these guys and motivate them. I really think this has got to be done. But, and I'm going to be very frank now, the present government don't make use of us. I'm talking about the military, and the newly appointed chief of the National Defence Force also comes out of the Special Forces. I'll make it a task to go and speak to him, to ask him. We don't want money. I don't want S&T. I'll pay my own way back. And I'll even go and show these new students where are all the crayfish holes that they can teach them how to scuba dive. And we will really, just to intermingle with them, I feel it's very important. And if it could be bred out of this talk that we could do this type of thing, it will be great. Because not only our year group, but out of the year groups that we have, there was a chief of the Air Force, a chief of the Navy, commands of geographical areas, guys who fought in the wars, various wars, who saw action all over Africa. We could contribute to these guys and motivate them. I'm really gonna speak to the chief of the National Defence Force, because I can't give you a clear answer. Nothing negative at the moment, really, because we would have heard this if there were scandals and this type of thing, and guys inferior that passed there, and all this type of thing. But this is really my candid answer to this difficult question. I don't have a clear-cut answer, but I think there's going to be something. I'll go and speak to the Chief of the National Defence Force.
I must tell you, sir, that I think it will actually work, because the ingrained respect which we have as Africans for the elders and the wisdom we can learn from them is part of our nature. That is our DNA. So it would be really nice to see the old generals like yourself and the senior men to go and speak to these youngsters. And if you do so, please come back here and tell us what happened. We fascinated.
No, we'll do so.
We want to know.
We'll do so.
Okay, then I will end this one then. I say thank you to you for your time, sir. We're most grateful to you for the insights. I've heard somewhere that you can see a military academy man from a distance away. I'm not sure if it was meant as a compliment or not, but I think it was. And in the next episode, I suppose we can talk about the Afrikaner. And then after that, we will go back to your military career, this distinguished one you had. I wonder, before I say goodbye, sir, do you wish to answer about being able to see a military academy man at a distance? Do you think it was a compliment or not?
No, you know, Koos, in the military, there were guys running for posts, same age, same merits, all these things. The one had a degree, the other one didn't have a degree. But I always tell the guys, the degree does not make the man, but the degree gives the man keys to open up. There are a lot of other soldiers that didn't go to the military academy that studied part-time and even got doctorates doctorate degrees. But the degree doesn't make the man makes himself. But the advantage of a degree is it gives you keys to open up doors for further study and enhancement in the situation. No, I don't think you can. Oh, well, perhaps if he wears the blazer, but all my blazers are now gone. But we always stand together. We're a good bunch of guys. But I've also got friends who didn't go to the military academy, were just as good, and who also obtained very high positions in the defense force.
It is
But
always,
I think it's a compliment.
I must say, it's always I say goodbye to you and then another question pops into my head, but that's not my fault. This is fascinating. Would you say that the academy plays a crucial role to produce what we call an officer and a gentleman?
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. Uh, most definitely, and the whole curriculum is also there to shape this young officer into something. But that they achieve with the other military academies as well, on the French, uh, even the Germans, and most definitely at the American military academy. Uh, that is so. I know Hitler once said to his generals, uh, I didn't go to the academy and learn to eat properly. I'm just a politician. Now, yeah, they teach you. No, they groomed us very positively with formal mess dinners, wine tastings that came through to Saldanha from the KWV. They taught us how to enjoy wines, not to consume wines, but to use it as a gentleman. No, they really did this, even on the sports fields and so on. And look, there were some naughty guys that did very naughty things, but not criminal things. Just a little bit of mischief. But they really taught us to be a gentle officer.
So it would have been good experience for a military attaché in later life to come through the
Oh
academy.
yes, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. Fortunately, I was never a military attaché, uh, but these things happen. If I could have my time back, I would have taken the same path. Rather go to the bush than to sit in a foreign country.
Okay, thank you. That was fascinating, sir. Thank you very much. I think we'll end it here now. Actually, for real, we've been speaking more than an hour once again, and they'll carry on with the next one just after this.